And I'm Catherine.
And we're going to be talking about the different cultural values in Mexico, Ireland, and Germany. So I am doing Mexico, and my experience with Mexico, both of my parents were born in Mexico. We're from Michoacan, and they came to the US when my dad was 17 and when my mom was 14. And they've kind of been living here in the US ever since, and I go back every once in a while, pretty often, maybe like once a year, once every 2 years, maybe in the summer. And you want to talk about your experience?
Yes. So my country is Ireland, and my grandmother was born and raised there. And I spent a semester studying abroad 2 springs ago, which was awesome. And I got to meet all of my family and see where she grew up and, the life that she came from. So I really love Ireland and talking about it.
Hi, I'm Molly again, and I'll be talking to you about Germany today. I lived there for 3 years when I was in middle school, and I will be studying abroad there this coming semester.
All right. So for our activity, oh no. So we want you guys to see if you know where our countries are. So if the teachers could select a student to go up to the board and point out, we'll go one by one. So can a student go up to the board and point out Mexico? And just kind of type in the chat when you're done.
You can't try. All right.
Okay.
Can you do the same thing for Germany?
And once you've found Germany, if you can go point out where Ireland is.
All right, so this is where the countries actually are. If the teacher could please point out where they actually are. If you got them right, good job. And if not, please take a moment to look at where these countries actually are.
Yeah, so we have Germany over here in the lime green, and then Ireland in the darker green on the map to the right, which shows Europe. And then on the map to the left, you have Latin America, and Mexico is in yellow towards the top.
All right. And so I'm going to be talking about 2 Mexican values. They are tradition and tomorrow. And this is a Mexican flag, which a lot of people have already seen. So for traditions, this is one of the biggest cultural values in Mexico. Mexicans are very proud and they're heavily reliant on their history. They all have a very traditional family structure and defined gender roles, religious rituals, obligations, and celebrations. So we see this love for tradition in both everyday life and celebrational gatherings. And especially so in like regular everyday roles where like a lot of Mexican families like to have the women at home and men often go out and work. And so even there's like unspoken social agreements in everyday life. So I know, for example, in my family, when we get together, the women for like parties, the women stay inside and they always make sure the men are fed and the men are outside. And that's just kind of how it always is. Nobody really questions it. And so the women also never eat until the men are fed, and that's just kind of something that always happens. So my question for you guys is, how do you think this might be perceived as negative? So if you guys could kind of discuss this in class and kind of come up with a different ways that people might see this as a negative value, because we want to make sure that you guys understand the different perceptions of these cultural values. And kind of type in the chat when you're done discussing. All right, so depending on what you guys discussed, so one way that I kind of came up with that this might be perceived as a negative is Mexicans can be very resistant to change. And so one of the consequences of this is that people can be hesitant to speak up when they believe or think in different things. And this is now changing with young people, but because tradition is so deeply rooted in our history, it's going to take a lot longer for change to happen. And so the next, oh, and so these are some of my pictures from when I was in Mexico, and you can kind of see one of the examples that I give. In the top left corner, that's my little sister and my cousin in church. And so one of the things that when I went over there in Mexico that I never realized was that little girls can't wear nail polish or like any sort of like small lipstick in church until they have done their first communion. And so that day my little sister had nail polish on, and my little cousin had told her, why are you wearing nail polish? That's not allowed. And so that's kind of like one of the old school values. And then on the bottom left, that's me with all my cousins. And that's kind of like our traditions that we have in Mexico. We have like a rodeo every December. And then in the middle, that's kind of all my friends again. And you see the traditional clothing that we're wearing, and that's very typical around the holidays. And so top right is my 5 generations of women in my family. And then the bottom right is also the rodeo that we have every December, and it's kind of been around forever. And we don't really know like the origin of it, but we kind of just do it because it's tradition. And then the second cultural value is tomorrow, which is mañana in Spanish. And so for tomorrow, this is like another lifestyle kind of difference. So time in Mexico is a lot different than it is here in the US. When you think of time here in the US, you kind of say like, it's very structured. If you're going to be here at this time, then you should probably be there like 5 minutes earlier. And so in Mexico, we value our time a little different. And it's not to say it's, better or worse. It's just people value each other's time differently. So in Mexico, there's a lot more flexibility. So if you say you're going to be somewhere at like 9, it's kind of just like a given parameter, and people are a lot more flexible. They're more understanding of, if you arrive a few minutes late, it's fine, stuff comes up. But we aren't as strict with time as we are here in the US. And so I want you guys to think about the same question again. How do you think this could be perceived as a negative in any other culture? Discuss that with your classmates and let us know when you're done. All right. So one of the ways this might be perceived as a negative is that you can be seen as unreliable, or like you don't care enough about other people's time. But it's not that. It's just people value their time differently. And so like one example of this is here in the US, for like birthday parties or events, you kind of have to RSVP, and the invitations usually say like the event is from 5 to 7, and you arrive at 5 and you leave at 7. In Mexico, nobody does that. And even here in the US, the Mexicans that I know, we never do that. Uh, I guess the event usually starts when the first person gets there and it ends until the last person leaves. Um, and so, it's a way it can be seen as negative, is not being unreliable or unappreciative of people's time, but it's not. It's just different from what we're used to. And so the bottom left is a picture of my hometown. And so it looks really, really early. And that's usually when people are waking up and going to work. And then some people don't wake up until way later. And then the second picture on the right is a picture of my parents' wedding, their 25th anniversary wedding. And that was a funny day because nobody arrived on time, and it was perfectly fine with the church. I think we were like an hour late, and the pastor just started an hour late. So, in any other situation, that would have been very upsetting. And so going to Ireland.
So moving into two of the values that are found in Irish culture. But first, the harp that you see on here. The harp is the national symbol of Ireland and seen on a lot of the money, on a lot of the symbols, and just representative of the music in Irish culture. So the first value is being warm, friendly, and welcoming. And they have a reputation around the world, and a lot of people, even if they don't know Ireland very well or Irish people really well, will say that the Irish are very friendly. They tend to be easy to talk to, and they often take a genuine interest in foreigners and people who are here and trying to learn about Ireland and things that they're about. And so it's always funny that a successful conversation is supposed to be when you like leave a conversation with an Irish person and you feel like they know everything about you, but you know absolutely nothing about them. So we tend to ask a lot of questions. And there's also a saying that the Irish have the gift of gab, or like I said, are very easy to talk to. And because of that, a lot of great poets and writers came from Ireland. And so some of those are like James Joyce and Yeats, if you're familiar with any of them. And with the gift of gab, I wanted to share, there's a legend where that came from, that if you kiss the Blarney Stone in Cork, Ireland, which I'm doing in the top left picture, it's a stone that was put in this castle a long, long time ago. And the story is that a witch had bewitched this stone and given it the gift of gab. So anyone who kissed it was able to be a great conversationalist, basically just talk really well and be able to get what they wanted out of conversations. So that's a big attraction now, is to go and kiss the Blarney Stone. And on the bottom right is a picture of someone else doing it, but it just shows you a little bit better of the stone at the bottom of the castle, and you have to be lowered down to kiss it. And also one thing I didn't mention in the previous slide, in the bottom right corner, the saying that's in Irish, which is the national language, but most people speak English, and it literally means 100,000 welcomes. So again, that's just a common phrase that you will see everywhere, showing that the Irish like to welcome people and are very kind to foreigners. And then the second value that I wanted to talk about was this idea of harmony on the face of things. And so this basically means that Irish people can be really good at making it seem on the surface like everything is okay, that they're happy, that things are going well, when in reality they might be really frustrated or just really upset, and are very good at separating those two of here's what I'm actually feeling and here's what I'm going to show people that I'm feeling. And a reason this arose was because for a long time, the Irish were under the control of the British. And so they basically had to obey what they were telling them to do and live the life that the British were forcing them to. But the Irish can harbor a lot of resentment and, kind of hide it, like I was saying. And so that led to a big uprising in 1916 when the Irish basically overthrew the British government. And the British government was kind of taken off guard because they didn't know that these resentments had been harbored for so long. And another thing that comes from harmony on the face of things is banter. And so that's basically Irish people making fun of each other, making fun of themselves, and just trying to keep things light and funny. And so there's a saying that the more someone makes fun of you, the more that they actually like you. So again, just keeping things light. And before I move on, if you would like to turn and talk to each other about some negative aspects that may be seen from these two values. So some of the negatives that can come from this value of being friendly and open is being seen as also invasive and prying, like I said with that example of trying to learn everything else about someone, but not sharing a lot about yourself. And then also for harmony on the face of things, this can be interpreted as being confusing or secretive because they tend to not show, how they're really feeling all the time. And I have this little video to show Irish people just saying a little bit about what it means to them to be Irish and, their big takeaways from that.
I'm proud to be Irish because we're well known all over the world for our generosity and good behaviour.
We're great crack and we get on with everybody. Because we reach all corners of the world and bring joy to it.
It's a great country to live. People are so friendly. We're all friendly towards other people.
We're challenging them.
Pubs and the banter and stuff, especially on Paddy's Day. So, yeah.
Because of our international image abroad. Our police officers don't need to carry guns.
I'm proud to be Irish because we have great crack.
Small country, but we've got a good mix of cultures, especially in Dublin. Whenever I go abroad, I love coming home to the Irish people. But when I meet Irish people abroad, I like that, it's kind of like we've known each other for years, but we might have only met 5 minutes ago.
We're always good for a laugh.
Everyone's really social and everyone's always up for going out and everything.
I love the culture. I love the people. We're so friendly. And it's the best little country in the world.
Because it's the best big country in the world. There's no place like home. We're caring. Family comes first. We know how to have a laugh. We're considerate. We're going through tough times at the moment, but that doesn't take away why anyone should not be proud to be Irish.
Happy Paddy's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Slá féile fág.
Yes, so that was, like I said, just a little video of the perceptions that Irish people have of themselves. And like you saw, there's a lot of being friendly, being open, having fun, and a lot of those is why people are proud to be Irish.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about German cultural values, and the symbol is the crest of Germany. So the first value is directness or Gerechtigkeit. So this is very, very common in the workplace in Germany. They have very open and honest communication, and that also goes for personal life as well. And they directly address issues, and this can be a really great thing because it helps you efficiently solve problems. Germans tend to separate the message from the messenger. So that really differs from America oftentimes, because in America, when you're trying to sell something, you generally sell yourself first. You try to be relatable. You try to get the people to like you and then sell your product. This is seen very differently in Germany. So sometimes because of this different cultural value and understanding, if a German person were to sit through an American person's presentation, they might think, okay, like this is cool, but do you not have the facts to back up this? Is this why you're just trying to have all this social backing up of your point? So they're very, like, facts and research are very valued. And these two quotes on here. So the first one is, wenn Sie nicht geschlossen bekommen haben, ist das schon genug Lob. So that basically translates to, if you haven't been scolded, that's praise enough. So definitely different ideals of like encouragement also. So just if you're not scolded, like that's praise. And then the second one relates more to the personal life of being direct. And it's haben Sie zugenommen? And that means, have you gained weight? So that's also very different from American culture. Normally, you would never ask that to someone, or that'd be considered very offensive. But in German culture, it's not considered offensive at all, actually. It actually expresses care. And it's just, so eine Feststellung, it's just like an observation. It's very objective. And it's very much just a, are you taking care of yourself kind of question. So yeah, directness. And how do you guys think that that could be interpreted in a negative way? Take a little minute to talk about that. So this directness can definitely lead to some cultural clash and misinterpretations. I thought this illustration really showed that pretty well. So it's comparing Germany to the United States. So the German man is just saying nein, which means no. And the American man is saying yes, but no. So this quote I thought really just summed it up. And it's by a man who worked in Germany for years, who's American. He says, Germans say what they mean what they say. Don't beat around the bush. Don't use euphemisms. Clear, direct, unambiguous. Get to the point right away. To Americans, as to many other English-speaking people, the Germans thus appear impatient, obnoxious, and at times even insulting. So this can definitely be interpreted as a negative trait. If someone just comes straight out and like shuts you down. But in Germany, it's seen as being just more efficient and more honest. So the next cultural value I want to talk about is sense of order, or Ordnungssinn. So in Germany, it's very, very common if you walk into a meeting or any social gathering, really, there's going to be an agenda. It's going to be very structured. It will have been very well planned beforehand. There's going to be a detailed itinerary, and deadlines are upheld. So it is very rare for a deadline to be extended. If you ask for an extension, probably will be seen as disrespectful, or like you just don't have your life together. There's definitely an emphasis on being logical, being reliable, and being efficient. Again, so efficiency really ties into both of these values of directness and sense of order. But with the sense of order, there usually is seen like a right way versus a wrong way. There's a right way to do something, and it's usually planned out, and better 5 minutes early than 1 minute late. So this definitely differs from other cultures. Yeah. So it's seen as very disrespectful in Germany if you are late to an appointment. And then that quote, pünktlich wie die Maurer. So that's basically like on time, like the bricklayer. So that comes from like old times in Germany of just being like very punctual like a working class individual, just being on time to your job. So how do you think that this could be interpreted negatively? Along with just cultural clash, this can be interpreted as being very inflexible, or leaving no room for creativity, very perfectionist and unforgiving as well. And I included this picture. This is a picture of like a modern German apartment. So I think this sense of order is even reflected in their modern architecture as well. Things tend to be very like clean cut, very minimalist, usually lots of like whites and grays and more like earthy tones. So that's just an interesting reflection in like physical life as well.
Awesome. So now that we've gone through 2 cultural values from each of our countries, we wanted y'all to take a minute and try to identify 2 American cultural values that you think we have. So for example, time is money. And so please take a minute and talk with people around you to try to think of 2 values that really guide American life. And also feel free to post them in the chat so we can see them as well. Using the chat.
So hopefully you were able to brainstorm a couple of values. These are 7 US American values that a really awesome website, Cultural Detective, identifies. They're time is money, like that example, and then tell it like it is, play by the rules, reach for the American dream, level the playing field, take charge, and it's up to you. So a lot of this has to do with, if you've ever heard of that phrase, like pull yourself up from your bootstraps. So like very much like independent thinking and like you're responsible for your own success kind of ideas. And how do you guys think that any of these could be negatively interpreted from another culture's point of view? So maybe if you come from another culture, thinking about that, or like thinking about how those values would seem from one of our cultures that we're representing's point of view. Go ahead and talk about that.
We had one answer, money doesn't grow on trees, as kind of a possible value, which does kind of overlap with some of those ones.
Yeah, it's definitely, money doesn't grow on trees. That's a good one. That definitely plays into the, you have to like earn everything.
Like the take charge one.
Yeah. Take charge.
And I can give a quick example too, if y'all are just trying to get things thinking, that from an Irish perspective, the American idea of time is money seems a little crazy because they feel like Americans just feel like they have to be doing something all the time and can never take a break. We wake up sometimes super early. Like I'm sure you were in school really early this morning. But when I was doing school in Ireland, the earliest class I had, I think was 10 a.m. and they don't do anything earlier than 9 a.m. And similar to Mexico, the time isn't as strict. If you show up a little late, it's not a big deal. It's not considered rude. So those are definitely are perceived differently in America and in Irish culture.
Yeah, and kind of like adding on to that, in Mexico, usually around the holidays, a lot of people have like family-owned shops, and so they'll always close down towards the holidays or make their hours really short. That's kind of like very different from here in the US, where we kind of see, with Thanksgiving coming up, we see stores opening earlier and earlier on Thanksgiving Day, whereas in Mexico, people kind of shut down earlier and earlier to allow more time to be with family. And so you see how we value like family a little bit more than money, whereas in the US, it's very different.
From the German perspective, the "it's up to you" value could definitely be viewed as selfish or like self-absorbed, just thinking about yourself and how you can gain just for the individual. There tends to be more of a group think going on in Germany, more of a like the group is more important than the individual. So if you have any questions for us, please go ahead and type them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them.
Feel free to ask us about anything from our countries, and we will more than gladly answer.
Or if you just have any comments on maybe American values or how this made you think differently at all, or anything that surprised you.
So how are the Christmas markets in each country, or maybe how is Christmas celebrated, some of the traditions?
Well,
okay, you can go.
Okay. I spent a lot of Decembers in Mexico, so I have a lot of experience with that. So by markets, I'm thinking you're talking kind of like about like toy shopping and kind of like Christmas gift shopping, stuff like that. So in Mexico, we celebrate Christmas differently. So it's kind of more like about the actual birth of Jesus Christ, and we don't do like the whole exchanging of gifts with like Saint Nick and Santa Claus thing. Instead, we do like Three Kings Day, and that's in January. And so on Christmas, you kind of just go to church and you spend time with your family. And so you don't really see a lot of like people rushing around to stores and like buying gifts to get everybody. And that's something we do differently too. Like we don't do a gift for you and a gift for you and a gift for you. We kind of just do Three Kings Day on January 6th. And then you just get your gifts from Three Kings and that's it. We don't really have like here, you got to go buy everybody a gift.
Yeah, so in Germany, Christmas is huge. The Christmas markets are incredible. They make me so happy. I love Christmas. So the Christmas markets, basically the whole center of a city like shuts down, but also comes alive because it'll usually be snowing. There's a lot of snow in Germany, usually in the wintertime. And all of these different like stands open up, and there'll be a lot of different foods. Sometimes there's like chocolate covered fruit, so chocolate covered bananas, and there'll be traditional German food as well, like schnitzel or spätzle, which is a type of pasta. And then there's always Glühwein, which is a fermented wine, and there's also Kinderwein, which is a non-alcoholic version for kids. And there's just lights everywhere, and there's Christmas music playing, and then there's tons of traditional crafts that are sold. So I remember one time I got this like hedgehog that was made out of a pine cone. It was really cute. But there's all these different crafts, and there'll be people singing, and it's very fun. Yes, so Christmas is magical in Germany, I think. And they have, a lot of decorations and the whole like Santa Claus and opening gifts.
And Irish Christmas, I would say, is pretty similar to how Americans celebrate Christmas, but I would say that it's not quite as big as in, America, we start celebrating so early or not celebrating, but, all the decorations are out and things for sale are out to, like Bernice is saying, to buy presents for everyone. And it's still similar like that in Ireland, and they put up lights, but there's no big markets like there are in January, really. It's just very similar with, they have more toys out in the stores and you go and get gifts. And Ireland's also a very culturally Catholic country. And so a lot of people on Christmas will go to Mass, and they will go and spend the days with their families because Ireland's not a very big country, so it's pretty easy to get around. It takes only about 2 hours to get from one side to the other. So people try to go mostly and spend at least the day with their family, if not a couple of days, because businesses do tend to shut down similar to the American ways that they shut down right around Christmas time or on Christmas Day. So pretty similar to American celebrations.
And so I'd like to know a little bit more about Irish culture and history. So if there's a few facts that you want to share.
Sure.
That's complicated history,
yeah.
I'm sure, but.
Yeah. Let me think of how to say this concisely. So in Ireland, it's there's a big Celtic history. So people who don't know how to explain this exactly. They're kind of like the native people of Ireland. And there's a lot of ruins still in Ireland of these Celtic burial grounds and of these castles. And there's just so many castle ruins in Ireland if you just drive about, from a history of not only the Celtic clans, which was a big thing, and the clans controlled different parts of the country, but also then kings and lords who began to control different parts of the country. And then when the British began to rule, they would send in British lords to control, or they would send in like laws that the Irish lords had to answer to. So just a big history of controlling different parts of the country. And I think that can be seen still with, there's something called the GAA, which is like the Gaelic Athletic Association. So a lot of Irish games that we don't have here really, such as hurling and camogie, and games that are kind of like lacrosse, but they're like Celtic games. And so those are all very split up into the different counties, and there's a lot of pride behind the counties and what part of the country that you are from. And there's also a big time of immigration from Ireland where a lot of people left. And so one saying is that, there are Irish all around the world, because a lot of people ended up coming to the US, like my grandmother and a lot of other people, but also to Australia, to Argentina, to the UK, just really all over the world. So there's a cool connection between Ireland being such a small country, so small that it's only half the size of North Carolina, which it doesn't seem like that when you look at a map, but having this big impact and this big display over the world.
And there's a split between Ireland and Northern Ireland?
Yes, there is a split between Ireland and Northern Ireland. There was a big dispute. The British were the Protestant church and wanting to control Ireland and make it all Protestant, but a lot of the people were Catholic. And so there was this big religious dispute of Catholic versus Protestant. And there has been some troubles and some wars that have gotten really violent over the Catholic and the Protestant, and which one is right, who's going to control what. But they're basically, the top part of Ireland is part of the UK. Northern Ireland has remained part of the United Kingdom and was considered like the Protestant part of the country, while the Republic of Ireland was very Catholic. And however, even though it is part of the UK, it's still one country. You can drive back and forth without needing a passport. People in Northern Ireland have like dual citizenship between the UK and Ireland, so it's interesting.
So Berenice, were you ever able to help make tamales in Mexico or any other traditional foods that you maybe have made?
You guys are making me hungry. So I just want you guys to keep in mind that Mexico has very distinct areas. So like all my experience has come from living in the rural parts of Mexico. So the urban areas are a little bit different. But yes, yes, I have. Usually every year we go to my grandma's house. Well, we have to go to all three of my grandparents' house because then they'll feel bad if we don't go. But we usually go to my grandma's house and kind of help her make food. And then the rest of my grandparents already have food. But some traditional plates are like tamales, which is how do you explain it? It's called masa, which is corn flour mixed with like water and some sort of fat. And then you spread it on a corn husk, and then you put meat inside and you wrap it up and then you steam it, and it's so good. And then that's kind of like there's, like here in the US, you have, what do you guys have for like Christmas? Like ham? Ham. Okay, for Christmas in Mexico, we usually have like tamales, pozole, which is hominy, and pork meat, and then like all kinds of different sauces mixed in. And those are the two big ones. But yes, I have, and it's amazing.
All right, and Molly, would you want to tell us a little bit more about how much Germany has changed since World War II? So a little bit of more modern history.
Sure, yes, big question. Definitely has changed. So let's see, currently Germany politics are definitely different in Germany than they are in the US. There's many more parties. So instead of just two parties, there's lots of parties that work together in what's called a coalition government. And so right now it's led by the Christian Democratic Party. It's led by Angela Merkel. So she's a woman and she leads the country, and she's also the de facto leader of the European Union. And then they work in coalition with the Social Democratic Party and also the Green Party. Since World War I, Germany has been a leader in renewable energy resources, a leader in addressing issues of global warming and climate change. After World War II, sorry, that's what I meant. After World War II, the country was reunified. So it had been split, if you guys have heard of like East Germany versus West Germany, had been split between Eastern powers and Western powers. But the country was reunified. And today, still, there are some differences. You can tell the eastern part of the country still has like a weaker economy than the western part of the country today. So there's lasting effects from that. But they have been like growing together for sure. If you guys are familiar with like the Berlin Wall falling or anything, that was part of like reunification. A big thing that's been happening in Germany has been how they deal with the immigration or the refugee crisis. So the past couple of years, Europe has seen a really large influx of refugees coming from the Middle Eastern area or like Eastern Europe. And Germany has been a leader in that, in setting like very open laws for like accepting migrants and refugees in to the country. Unfortunately, this has seen some backlash as there wasn't quite enough infrastructure like prepared to handle such an influx of people in general. So there's been a rise of more like far right party that definitely has been running on like nationalist values. And this can especially be seen in like Austria. There's a very, very strong presence of the far right. But still in Germany, it's still like a Christian Democrat, Social Democrat, Green leadership happening. But yeah, so reunification has occurred since World War II, but there's still lasting effects from that separation. And yeah, we're still working on how to like handle the refugee crisis.
And Kat, if you can tell us a little bit more about the separation of Northern Ireland and Ireland, and also the question of how things have maybe changed since the 1990s. I don't know if there's something particular there.
Yes. So I'm not the best about giving like specific information about this. I only know a little bit more of an overview. But basically, there's this thing, like I said, called the Troubles. And it was when there was a lot of violence outbreak between Northern and Southern Ireland and the Protestant and the Catholics, and what was going to be allowed in Ireland. And I think someone asked about the IRA, and that was basically kind of like its like.
It's called the Irish Republican Army, and I actually wrote a final paper on this for one of my classes.
Please go ahead then.
So the IRA, originally actually, so with the Troubles, with Northern Ireland versus Ireland, or it's like Southern Ireland, there was just a movement in Northern Ireland of Catholics, and it started out as a nonviolent movement for just better treatment of Catholics in Northern Ireland. When that movement began, it saw severe repression from the state. It was crushed violently. Basically, long story short, in response to that, the peaceful protesters and the people who had originally been behind that saw a lot of radicalization, and so it developed into a violent conflict. And the IRA emerged and was declared as a terrorist organization. And so there was a lot of turmoil in Belfast, especially with bombings by the IRA against Protestants, and also just like the British in general still having like lasting effects in there. But yeah, that stemmed from a violent suppression of originally peaceful protest.
And thank you. And in response to the 1990s, I remember from like an outside of Ireland perspective, and like my family here in America, when I went there, they're like, oh, like be careful, Northern Ireland, you shouldn't go. Like still thinking that, this is a dangerous and violent place. And I was even able to see one of the most bombed buildings in the world that happened during that time. But today, like those, I would say those feelings really aren't there anymore between like younger people in Ireland, especially. It's still very open. Like I said, people can pass through very easily. It's very safe to go there. There's not any of those harsh feelings between the Protestants and the Catholics anymore, except for maybe people who were very tied, like older people who were really tied to those politics when they were growing up. But I would say now in modern Ireland, the violence is seen as part of the history and not something that is taken in, like happening right now, if that makes sense. So it is a very safe place. It's not dangerous anymore.
So real quick, one more question. The difference between how Germany and American cultures are the same, so maybe one or two similarities, and then we'll wrap things up.
So the difference between, or how they're the same?
I think how they're the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Germany uses euros. To answer that question that just popped up, Germany uses euros as part of the like European Union. I'm pretty sure almost every member of that uses euros, but yeah. So some ways that they're the same. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, people in general are very caring, even though it might come off as like they're kind of distant from the get-go, because that's a difference in culture where Americans just tend to like open up immediately. It takes longer usually for Germans like feel comfortable doing that, but that doesn't mean that they don't care. And I think that's something that's often like a stereotype of Germans, that they're just mean, which is, I think, really an undeserved stereotype. Just because they're not as like outgoing at first doesn't mean they don't care. So that's something that I think is similar, that people do genuinely like want to know how you're doing, and they really are interested in how your life is going and making sure that you're healthy, making sure that you're taking care of yourself. And then on just a general level, I mean, when I was living there, like I lived in a German community. People are just pretty similar. Like you just walk around on your day-to-day activities. A lot of my like German friends also liked to like sing, or I actually was in an Irish dance school with German and American kids, and we were like very good friends. Some of my closest friends were German. And we just enjoyed talking about dance together and talking about how school was going. So there's a lot in common of just like being people.
Good. So thank you everyone for all of your questions, and we hope that you learned some things about Germany, Ireland, and Mexican culture today. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes with our next presentation, which is on the Montagnard ethnic group of Vietnam, and we're going to learn about music and tools and weaving and different aspects of that culture in about 5 minutes. So we'll see you guys back soon. Bye.
Thank you.